12 p.m. here in New York. Welcome to the Dorman Lunch Learn. Today we are exploring the Automotive Labscope, and we're going to be using a brand new Autel S2 Labscope in this particular webinar. Okay. You all know about me. My name is G or Jerry or whatever. That's all okay. Let's get rolling. We're going to talk about some scope essentials, setting voltage, time, and trigger, because that's all important when you're using a scope. DC versus AC coupling. Now that's also important because sometimes you want AC. Now, majority of times we set stuff up for DC. Oh, and let me say this, let's not forget, if you want to make a comment, please put it in the chat box. We do not answer the question boxes. The chat box is where we would do it. Using scope accessories, we're going to be using two different types of amp clamps, a high current clamp and a low current clamp. And these are clamps that did not come with this scope. These are just other aftermarket clamps to show you that sometimes you don't need to buy a particular manufacturer's clamp. Obviously, the Autel clamp is a great clamp. There's also other clamps out there like Fluke and so on, and Launch and all that. But here we're going to use a PDI clamp, or two of them, a high current and a low current. We're going to talk about some major signals, live waveforms on the vehicle. Now, we don't have a handout ready for you. Why? Because what I'm going to do for you is some of the screenshots that we're actually going to be taken live off the vehicle, I'm going to include them in your handout. Where can you get the handout? Well, after we're done, you could go to dormantrainingcenter.com, or if you want them pretty much almost immediately, say by the end of the day, you go to ATTS Training. Under videos, and you need to put your email in there and make yourself a password, and go under Dorman Lunch and Learn, so it'll be there. And this is going to be our September one. Yes, I know it's October, but I've been on the road a lot. You will get another webinar next week at, I think, Wednesday as well. So that is what's going on. Okay. And let me also say, besides scope information, I will be down this coming Saturday doing a live class. We have 2 seats left down in Comar, PA at the Dorman Proving Grounds. Okay, the class is $300. There's more information at the end. So if you want to bring your Labscope out and hook up to test boards we have and then go right on the vehicle, and it is a limited amount of people in the class, and I will be the instructor down there. So before you get off, I figured we'd say that. Let's talk about scope info. No matter what brand you have, a scope is a scope. A scope has to deal with time and voltage, okay? It's a very important thing to do. I know a lot of people buy scopes and they collect a bunch of dust. Why? Because they're afraid to use them. Don't fear using the scope. If you can use a test light, a logic probe, and most people in our field don't use logic probes a lot, a digital voltometer, then you can use a scope. There's no real difference other than, let's say this. If you're using a test light which has low impedance, what does low impedance mean? Low resistance. When you have low resistance on an electrical circuit, that can cause high current flow. So using a test light on a circuit, it's going to act as a jumper wire. You've probably all seen on yellow wires, which are usually designated for airbags, not to use low impedance. You need to have at least a 10 megohm, 10 million ohm resistance tool like a meter or a scope. And be very, very careful. I know in one of the classes I did here at my place on the Autel scope a few months back, someone brought in an inexpensive Labscope. It's pretty good to work, but you know what it did? It had low impedance and it brought down the whole signal. So it had a signal generator. Now, if you put that on a vehicle and you're using that scope, you may burn something out. Okay, so low resistance equals high amperage. Excuse me, I had to take a sip there. So basically, if you can use this meter, which a bunch of you guys use, or a graphing meter like the old Vantage, you can use a scope like this E-scope or a Fluke scope or Snap-on or Launch or Autel. In this case, we'll be using Autel. It's really not that hard. Rather than seeing numbers, you're going to see a graphing representation. And a couple of things I want you to get out of this today is when we're on this vehicle has a problem, okay? You're going to be able to identify that problem, and that's going to be important. So blow the dust off your scope and get ready to use it, because you not only can make money with it, but you can diagnose stuff correctly, whether this was a Porsche, whether it was a BMW, a Hyundai, a Kia, a Honda, Toyota, GM, Ford, whatever. You could easily do this, okay? So here, the scope, most scopes in automotive now are 10 by 10s. What do we mean? So we got more real estate than the old days. We have 10 vertical, as you can see here, 1 to 10, and we got 10 horizontal going across. So it's a 10 by 10 screen and divided into like 100 blocks. In a digital scope where the grid is made of light segments or dots instead of painted on the glass screen, you may have the option of turning the graduals off, the dots off, or the lines off, depending on what you like. Now, many times, I don't really care if the lines are back there or not. I can see the numbers here on the side. So if I seen something here right in between, let's say like a fuel injector, I could see what my charging voltage is off the vehicle. I could see if it's going to ground. And a little note I want you to make here. You see what his ground is? I'd like to be at least one line up, at least one box up from the bottom. Why? And write this down on slide 7. Why? Because if something goes underground and you're not utilizing that, you're all the way down here, you won't see if something went underground. How could it go underground? You could have a spike on the ground side, right? It's all possible. So there are examples that I have over the years capturing a lot of waveforms. Some throttle positions did it. Some injectors did it. Anything that can cause a downward spike could not be seen if you weren't at least one box over. Now, as we're going through this, if you have anything, I see the chat up. If you have any questions, please type them in there. I'll try to address them now. Doreen will make me aware of them, and we'll take it from there. Now, types of trigger, not Roy Rogers' horse for you old guys like me that remember Roy Rogers, okay? And not the place you guys eat at, okay? You young guys. But Roy Roger, he had a horse called Trigger. And trigger is important when it comes to a scope. What does trigger actually mean? Well, again, some of you old guys will remember this thing called a test light. This is called external trigger. Now, the older days before this particular test light, this is a magnetic type of setup that you would put on a wire. We had a little spring. We would take the spark plug boot off, put the spring on there, and a little clamp would go on. And then, of course, we'd press our timing light and see if it was 4 degrees, 10 degrees, whatever the manufacturer looked for, and adjust the distributor. That's called external trigger. When using a lab scope, it's internal trigger. An internal trigger is important. It's a question on the A8 and sometimes L1 test from ASE. Trigger is very important because if we don't trigger at the right level, you may never see a screen with a waveform on it, right? You may see it walking across the screen because the trigger is not set correctly. So I'm going to give you an example here of this top thing. I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to move this over. And let's look at this waveform on a snap-on. And this basically, follow my little green dot here. Number one, I could tell we're over 12 volts. We're about 14 volts or so. I could tell we went down to computer ground right here. From here to here is injection on time, okay? We can measure the on time, which is something not nice to know. I want you to write this down. Need to know most injectors that are non-GDI, most injectors non-GDI, are going to be anywhere from about 2 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds of on time. GDI, a half a millisecond to maybe 1.5 milliseconds. Okay? Very important to know that. Why? Because if they're not in that range, you may have some adjustment for fuel delivery that you don't want. That is the normal hot engine readings. 2 to 5, or about a half a millisecond to a millisecond and a half on GDI. Okay? So now, if I took this trigger level and moved it down below 0, I wouldn't see any type of waveform. If I took this and moved it here, I would not see this line here. This would all get moved to the left of the screen. If I took this trigger, the little plus right there, you all see that, and moved it all the way past the top, I would not see a waveform at all. Does that make sense to everyone? So trigger is a very important part of when you're using the scope. Now, when you trigger something, it is going to slow the scope up. This, what you're looking at, I call signature, the signature of a fuel injector, okay? And if I bring it down a little bit, you can see the peak here is going off the screen because I kind of cut the screen there. But we would want 100 volts per screen so we could see how far this goes up. Make a little note. The peak when it shuts off has to be a minimal of 35 volts. A minimal of 35 volts. Any questions? Okay, so trigger, you don't have it set right, you may not get a reading, or you'll see something walking across the screen. Let's look at AC and DC, okay? Not the group. Alternating signals, some like you see here in the back, crank and cam sensors. They're magnetic inductive type of sensors. It could be vehicle speed sensors. It could be anti-lock brake sensors. And let's not forget, both vehicle speed sensors and wheel speed sensors could also be a Hall effect. Same with the cam and crank. As you see here, these are AC signals. Knock sensors, they're always AC. Electric motors put out AC. And alternating charge and voltage also contain AC from the diodes, right? So very important how to hook your scope up. Let's talk about how you're going to connect to some of these particular signals, right? It's all well and good to say it does it, but gee, how do I get that damn signal on that scope? I can't get that waveform. Well, let's talk about that. Let's take a vehicle speed sensor. You would have 2 wires going to it and maybe 3, but one side, if you look at a wiring diagram, may have a little plus on it, okay? That's where you would put the red lead or the green lead or whatever color of the scope. The black lead could be on ground or on the other side of it. And what you would get is the signature should start from the bottom to the top, not the top to the bottom, okay? That would be a positive type of AC signal going up. Now, some cars, like some of the older BMWs that were standard, when you went on the AC crank sensor, it needed to see a downward spike first, if you had it triggered correctly, and then go up and then go down, okay? But it needed the downward so it knew that it was actually a manual transmission. And then there is peak voltage. If your peaks are too high, like on this, we have roughly a 4.5 positive peak, which would be from 0 up. And we have a negative peak, you can see is off the screen here, probably another 4 volts off. That would be called peak to peak voltage. If you were on a cam sensor or a crank sensor, we would go to one of the 2 wires, and if it has a 3rd wire being magnetic, that is a shield wire, okay? So you want to be on the sensor wire to see if you're going to get that screen. Any questions on that? Okay. So let's move on. Let's look at DC now. So DC, you can see we have digital mass airflow sensors. Well, you can check those all the time. Some will be square waves, some will be a linear line, meaning a DC line just going straight up and down. It's not going to do much, it's just going to do one of these. It's going to float up and down. It's not going to make a square wave. 4 digital map sensors, okay? Optical vehicle speed sensors, Hall effect, cam and crank, okay? Those are biggies, and a vortex airflow meter. So when you see stuff like this, this was called an optical distributor. An optical distributor has basically, and this is a 4-cylinder, how do I know? This is for the cam. That's 1, 3, 4, 2, right? 1, 3, 4, 2. There are 360 slits in here, okay? 360 slits that will make 720 transitions. What do I mean by a transition? A transition would be from the top to the bottom. So it's a 5-volt reference and it's being pulled to ground. So a transition is from the top to the bottom. This would be the cam. You can see 1, 3, 4, 2, and 1. And this would be the crank, okay? That's what they did on optical distributors. Where would you place your lead? There's 3 wires in most cases. Write this down. There could be 2 wires if they're using the chassis ground. That means the unit is already grounded. Why run another wire to that transmission, let's say, on a speed sensor? So please be aware of that. You would go to the reference wire, the signal wire, okay? You don't need a wiring diagram. A lot of guys get all nutty. Oh, I need a wiring diagram. Dude, there's 3 freaking wires going to it. One of the 3 is going to have the reference voltage, one's going to be the signal, and one's going to be the ground. You take your back probe pin and you go in there. And when you're looking at back probe pins, here what comes in this setup, and you could buy regular type of things, but here in this Autel kit, I'll pull out one of these pins. And you have long pin and short pins. Now sometimes you got to be careful with the particular pin. The real world, things don't always go in a weather pack real easy, right? And the reason for that is sometimes the weather pack is dry. So put a little silicone on the pin. Do not pinch the wire. Not a good idea to pinch wires because you're going to make a hole in that wire and you can cause an issue later on. So back probing the right thing would give you a good reading. When in doubt, when it doesn't back probe, I don't know if I have one here in this drawer. Well, we do. You have a couple of different ones here I want to show you. This here, in my opinion, where we live, and I don't know how close Doreen can get into this pin. Oh, you got it pretty good. Let me just turn it this way. You see this pin is pretty big. Okay, perfect right there. That's a pretty big hole it's going to put in the wire. Fluke has one that they call a Hitchman, and this is another style here where you put this out, and this pin, well, is a hay of a lot smaller. This is not a Hitchman. Hitchman's even smaller than this. But you can see how low or small this is. You see me moving it up? You see how small that is? This is basically better to use. So if you can't get a reading back probing, you surely can get a reading through this. Now, I don't like using any piercing things out here in the real world. On the East Coast, we have things called snow, and that thing called snow also gives us salt and brine and every other piece of junk that they're going to throw on the roads. That gets into any of that wiring that you pierced, you're going to have a problem, okay? So any questions so far, Doreen? Nothing? We're all good. Okay, let's look at relative compression. Now, how many out there do relative compression? Let me see. Pop in a letter Y. Letter Y, let me see. How many of you are doing that? And there's a couple of ways of doing it. Good, good. I see some good stuff there. Excellent. What are the 2 ways of doing it? We're going to do one way here today, maybe 2 depending on our time frame. We're only here for an hour, but I want you to make sure you do relative compression. If you don't check it, everyone likes looking at codes, and thanks for all the answers, everyone. I appreciate it. When you had a big box scope of years ago, if you've been around, well, you always checked everything starts with the battery, right? Battery got to be good. Do not have a battery maintainer on the vehicle. Do not have a battery pack on the vehicle when doing relative compression. Relative compression is not going to tell you the exact amount of compression in the cylinder. It's going to tell you electronically relative, either voltage drop or current drop, where the problem is. Okay, it's going to give us a reading. Now, is it 100% accurate? No, absolutely not. But it's about 80-something to 90% accurate. And wouldn't that be a good thing, right? Because let's say you get a code for a P0101 or an oxygen sensor code. You're not going to put any parts in that vehicle unless the mechanical part is good. I always equate it to if my ceiling here was falling down and I put a new ceiling up and I didn't check the walls or the foundation, if they're bad, isn't the ceiling still going to have a problem? Now, Ford Motor Company and Toyota, they put relative compression right into their scan tool for the simple reason their own technicians in their own dealerships have made the same mistake. What mistake? They put the parts in and didn't fix the car. And how do you go back to a customer like this particular vehicle here? How would I go back to that customer and say, you know, well, we put plugs in it, we did a tune-up and coils and all that. You know, they were bad, they needed it, but relative compression wasn't checked, and it's showing if I have a problem or not. If I had a problem, if I'm that customer, I'm not paying for that repair. Okay? So think about using relative compression. AC, which means you just go to the battery, you put the red clamp or yellow, whatever channel you're on, and the black across the battery. You couple the scope. Remember we said AC and DC? You couple the scope to AC voltage. AC rides on DC. So if you just did DC, you only see the voltage go down a little bit. Of course, it's stable DC voltage. You put AC, you're going to see all these little ripples. We're going to show you an example, okay? Today on this vehicle, I have a 650 amp clamp hooked up to it. So we're going to show you amperage relative compression. Now that means we take the amp clamp, we zero it out, and we put it around the wires. If there's 2 black wires or 2 red wires, you put it around all of the wires going to one side of that battery. If you don't do that, you're not going to get the proper reading, okay? So let's talk about relative compression. Here we have relative compression on a snap-on scope, and could you tell me what are we set up on? Are we using an amp clamp or are we doing something different here? So I want you to type that into the chat box. I'll wait a second, take a sip here. What do you think? I'm coming over to see what we got. Yeah, and we talked about handout will be done later. We'll put it in there.
Meter.
Okay, so Kevin says meter. A couple of guys say amp. Anyone else? Okay, I want you to write this down. We are not using an amp clamp here. We are using AC voltage. And here's how I'll prove it to you. You see what a zero is right here? We're above and below zero, aren't we? So all I'm doing, I want you to write down here on slide 13, because when you get the handout, you could fill that info in. We have the positive and negative lead of the scope hooked up to the battery, just positive and negative. The scope is coupled to AC voltage. And if you look at it, you know, what's our time frame? Well, you can see it's 1 second total screen, and here you're in millivolts, okay? So you can see the volts, volts. You can see the voltage here really doesn't get really high, but we are reading how each piston is going up and down. Does that make sense? Now, when I say this is good, I want to show you something here. I want you to stare at this. They should all have about the same in between, the same height, and the same bottoms. Take a good look here, and could you pinpoint anything, starting with this being number 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you see any of these, and I'll even blow it up for you, do you see any of these that could be a problem? Even though this is a good reading, compression-wise, it's showing me something different here. You guys that were in my class up in Rochester on ignition recently, about a week ago, if you're on, you should know this answer. So I see Doreen putting 4 fingers up, didn't give me the middle finger. She put 4 fingers up. So let's count that out. I'm going to count it out with my little doohickey here. 1, 2, 3, 4. A little bit, okay. Anyone else?
4 is lower.
Okay. 4 is a bit of a problem, but let's go over here. So here, you see the spacing? Here, this is okay. This is 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at 6. Look at 7. Okay. These are more of a problem. We'll go way out here. This is another problem. Now, this problem is not totally compression related. This is off a Honda on a vehicle that needed a valve adjustment. So it wasn't that the compression was bad. It was that the valves needed an adjustment. It wasn't really off, but enough to throw a code, believe it or not, for too rich of a condition. Now, it came from another shop, and they put, a whole bunch of stuff in there. And people make mistakes, but simple things like this, okay? Now, I don't have an example here of another good one. Maybe I'll pop one in for you on the handout. I didn't put it here. But a totally good one is going to be even right across the board. They would more look like this number 1 here or number 2 and stay consistent throughout, okay? Now let's take a look at this here from a Bob. A Bob is a breakout box, and this is on Pico 6. You could have Pico 7, it doesn't matter. One of the big things you have here is up top is battery voltage. And if you look at the battery voltage, well, what's going on there, okay? So if you notice up here, I am on a plus and minus 2 volts on the golden screen here, okay? So you can see the voltage drops down, okay? And then we get these humps. These humps all look pretty even, don't they? That's telling me I got a pretty good motor. Now, the green is basically one of these, we got starter amperage, and the starter current is right here on the bottom. So you can see the amperage peaked up, went down, and if you look at the amperage peak right here, we're about just under 600 amps. And as amperage went up, you notice all the voltage dropped on green and yellow. And the green one is out of the diagnostic link connector, and we have a Bob hooked up. Our Bob is pin what? Let me know what those pins are on a Bob that I'm going to use without even opening the hood up of a vehicle. I could use something called clear flood that we're going to use on this Ford Escape in a minute, okay? And we don't even need to open the hood up. What pins are we?
We got 16 and 4, 16 and 5.
Okay, so 16 and 4, very good. That is pin 16 is power, 4 is ground. Excellent. 5 is signal ground. Write that down. That means if you're going to use pin 5, that is more of like a floating ground. It is a ground that is raised off chassis ground. Where would we use that? Well, if you're on a Chrysler product and you're looking at an oxygen sensor signal and you're using chassis ground, you're going to go, what the hey, this is wrong. I'm seeing 2.5 to 3.5 volts. You're on the wrong ground. If you switch it to signal ground, you will actually see 0 to 1 volt, okay? So please keep that in mind. Any questions, please type them in. So you can see it's pretty easy here, right? Let's look at some fuel components. Well, right here we talked about, this is off a Fluke 192 scope, and here's our on time. You see your 2 milliseconds of time. This here, we're a little off there, but let's say that's 2 milliseconds. Right here would be 4 milliseconds, right? And this would be about, little about 5. If you add it up, roughly about 5 milliseconds of on time if you're doing that per screen. It says injector on time 3.6. Well, that's if this was, yes, it is 3.6. My mistake here. I'm counting outlines further. This would be 0, that's 2. This would be 4. We're at 3.6 milliseconds, like it says right here. The peak voltage, 10 volts per division. This is ground on this scope. 10 volts, 20 volts, 30 volts, 40 volts, 50 volts, 60 volts, roughly about 65 volts. Is that good or bad? What was the number I gave you before? Because this is important. If you don't see this peak get up to a certain number, you got a problem. What was that peak I told you guys about before? Come on, no numbers in there?
100?
No, not 100. It could go to 100, could go more. 35, good. 35 minimal, excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys paying attention. Now, how about current ramping? Your fuel pump. You know, before you take out your fuel pressure gauge, your fuel volume, which is way better than pressure, you really need to check, is the pump working really well? So here we have a picture of an amp clamp, my Fluke ADI-110. We got a fuse lead and we're jumping the relay. What pins, number one, do we jump on the relay? So write the number of pins in. You should know this. If you don't, I'll double go over it. And at slide 17, I want you to write it down. What pins? I think I see an answer up there.
30 and 87?
Excellent, thank you. 30 and 87. 30 battery power, 87 would be the pump. Very, very good. Now, one thing we don't have there. So these are all different amp clamps. This is the ADI-110. Probably set you back about 600 plus bucks. You can get a PDI like this, is what we're going to use today. These are about 100 bucks. Here, this is the best in my opinion, but now they're up to 700 bucks. This is an I-30S like in Sam, I-30S Fluke clamp. Excellent for power to sit a draw. We use the hay out of it. In fact, my tech, Mary, was telling me over the weekend when she went back to Massachusetts, she used that I-30S and she found a bad power to sit a drawer on a vehicle and helped one of her friends out. It is a phenomenal clamp, okay, but pretty expensive. This is what we're going to be using today. This is a PDI clamp that can do starter current and stuff like that. So that is the clamps that I would recommend out there. There are a couple of new clamps that are similar, not as good, but just like this is better than this. If you can get something that'll do the job and save you money, hey, isn't that the name of the game? I can't tell you how much money I have invested in hand tools and never mind other type of tools. It's an expensive business, isn't it? And my job is to try to help you make sure you make the right decisions, have the right equipment, have the right training so you can go out there, diagnose the vehicle correctly, make yourself money, and save time. Here, we're basically on an Autel scope. And the Autel scope, this is the version prior to this one, we are looking at a network test. And if you look at it, you can see we are the blue about a little over 2.5 down to about 1/2, and the red, if you look there, is the opposite, about just about 2 3/4 to roughly about 3 3/4. So what goes down comes up. They got to mimic each other. If we had a problem here where something was missing, let's say in the red, of course you got pin 6, high speed can, pin 4, low speed can, and if you had an issue there, you can see it. Now, increasing time to gather a lot of data, the picket fence. This is an important thing that you need to do with your scope. Once you see signature of the signal, so this is called the signature of the signal. This, I'm not looking at the signature. I am taking the time frame and closing it up big time. And when I see anything like this could be a dropout. If this is a crank sensor, well, that could possibly be number one ignition, right? Now, what do you notice about this pattern? Well, is it consistent where you got 3 and 2 in a space, 3 and 2, and now 4. So depending on what the signal is this a problem or not? But what I suggest here and want you to write down on slide 21, once you see that fuel injector, that square wave, it could be cam or crank like pictured behind me here, right? Doesn't matter. Once you see this, stop staring at it and going, let's see, I'm on the green here. The green, I'm going from 0 volts to about 4 point something, probably just under 5 volts. It looks good. I'm not going to see a problem sometimes looking at signature. I need to close it up and see if that signal is dropping out. Okay, that's important. Now here we got using cam and crank patterns to check VVT and cam timing. Okay, so we're going across and we're seeing one thing here. If you have red is a cam intake, blue is a cam exhaust, and green is the crank. You can see as they are going across the screen, one thing I want you to definitely be aware of, you notice they should not line up. I want you to look at the blue is in the middle. They're not like red on top of red with the square coming down. Notice they're all in different areas. If they're on the same, your timing chain or something has slipped, because it would be impossible for intake and exhaust to be on top of each other. Don't those valves open at different times? Yeah, okay, so that would be that. So we're gonna head over to the vehicle now. I'm gonna get on the scope. Let me take a sip here. And I'm gonna ask Bill to pop over. And if you switch to the scope, Doreen. Okay, so we're on the scope. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
You're gonna drive people crazy.
Okay, we set up to the right current. Now we should see it. Okay. Now I know you're going dizzy, but I'm going to play this back. If it can stabilize right there. We may want to do this. Put the camera on it. The amperage goes up to somewhere 6 something, comes down, and look at our waveform. Let's see if we can get that back a little more. Okay. Yeah, bad reflection. Zoom, there we go. Now look at the hump that is down on it. You see how this is? And you see how these are like lower? Okay. Right there. And look at it. You do all the movement on this new one. You can see that we have a cylinder that is an issue. And again, if we just play this back to give you, here's the high current. That's frame 3. Then we go across it and we can see we got a problem. And our voltage is a little under, probably about, just about 10 point something volts. And notice here, as amperage went up, voltage went down. If you cross it, we're probably at about 10.5 or so, okay? So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start this thing up. We have it on a fuel injector, and there are different channels. I'll put those on, and let me get these 2 channels up and going. Okay, Bill? Okay, Let me put the scope on live. So here, first of all, if you hear the car in the background, it ain't running too swift.
Oh my gosh.
So this definitely proves to us we have a problem. We're on #1 injector and #1 cylinder, but you really can't make heads or tails out of what's going on. I'll move the red down. The red is basically the ignition coil. I'm going to change the time per division. And now you can start to see the ignition coming across, but one thing you really can't tell is it's moving. You remember I said trigger? We're going to have to trigger off that channel. So I'm going to pick this trigger up, and I want to change what channel the trigger is on. So trigger on edge, trigger on channel A. Now notice how steady that picture is. That keeps the glare off. Okay, so does everyone see that? Now you may be going, well, that looks kind of weird. Could anyone tell me why does it look like I have 3 shots here? Why do I have 3 different types of signals for ignition?
Waste spark.
Okay, well, that's another way of saying it. Yeah, this is called multi-strike or waste spark. What it's doing is going, it's banging it. Now, if Bill races it up, once it's off idle, if this thing don't blow up on us. Notice how we went to 1, and I can lock it there. Now notice what we have from here to here is called dwell time. The amount of time that the coil is saturating. This big red line that went all the way up, and we could move that down more too. Okay, so there's the whole ignition pattern. We could see that that's called the firing line. This here is called the spark line. And I think I could blow this up like this. I can, look at that. Beautiful. This spark line right there, you see this thing called the jaggies in the middle? And I'm going to take a picture of this by holding the camera button down. And I'm going to give you this picture in your handout, okay? This spark line should be more of a slope, like this. It shouldn't have that, okay? But why did we have that? We got a compression problem, don't we? That's why you would get a problem in ignition. Now we also have fuel on here in our green one. And I got to see where the green baby is. No picture on that green. Did the wire fall off, Bill?
Still in there.
Still in there. Oh, it's on millivolts. That'll do you. Always look at your settings. So now on the green, we're out of time because we can see the ignition here. There's our battery voltage in the background, stable. The green, you may see a little amperage coming out from the alternator at this point going to the battery, but we'll take a picture here.
I just switched over.
Oh, you switch it to the low current clamp already? Okay. So the green is now on the low current clamp, which is going to be, I got to change, oh, it's on blue. I got to change blue from the big amp clamp to probe settings. I got to go down to the little amp clamp.
1 millivolt per
Yeah.
100.
If the eyeballs can see that here, 1 millivolt, where's that baby? I see 65, 65. Where is it? Isn't that?
1 millivolt.
Yeah, but it's for 650.
Oh.
You know, we can't see this video.
Oh, because I'm switch it to the other screen for now until I get this. Where's the on coil ignition probe? Let's try that.
Man, this sounds hard.
That's a real problem vehicle for you. Well, there's our current upside down if we flip the amp clamp around. And because you have number one ignition that you're triggering off of, number one fuel will be different. Bill is switching the amp clamp around. And the green one, it still looks upside down.
Yeah, it was set right. I don't know if it's
So green, every 100 millivolts.
set.
Oh, no, it should be.
The clamp is on the blue.
Oh, it's on blue? What's green?
Green is the
Fuel injector.
injector, yep.
Right. So blue. Blue, blue, blue. Blue's the amp clamp?
Yeah. That 1 millivolt for 101.
Oh, it keeps putting it here at that amplitude setting. Got a voltage probe setting. I think I'm just going to put it on 1-to-1 and then use voltage on blue. Yeah, it's there. And then I'll put 100 millivolts. Yeah, now it's upside down. So you see the blue right here? Bill's going to flip it around. And you see the hump right there? There you go. So there is, I could spread this out a little bit by playing with the time. And you can see the current and the voltage at the same time. So the blue is on the ignition.
Yeah, ignition.
Okay. So if you looked at this and you count up on the blue, your readings are not going to be right because every 100 millivolts equals an amp. You would have to set it out. But I could move this so you could see it and watch if Bill races it up just like the multi-hump there. Let's see what happens to that. You see we went to 1? Leave it right there, Bill. Ah, hang on. There we go. Let it idle. So you see how the multi went off both on the red and the blue? And maybe to leave confusion out, I'll take the green out and you'd be able to see that a lot better. So we'll take the screen there, race it up again. The fingers don't work sometimes. Okay, good. So you could do a hell of a lot with a scope and find if you got a problem on something, whether it be ignition, and again, it looks a lot more funky in this case because of an engine problem. So it wouldn't matter if we went on another cylinder, it ain't gonna make a big difference, okay? Questions? Okay, waste spark. As I'm yakking to you, let me move the scope towards me. I'll maybe try a different probe setting here. I thought I saw that low current clamp before, 65 amp, 1 milli. Yeah, there it is. Let's see if that does. It's the same setup as 100 millivolts. You don't always have to set the amp clamp up. So right now I am on current. And the nice thing here, you can put cursors on if you want to measure something. Of course, I got to look at it. Sorry about that.
I got a question.
So right there it would give us our current. It says it's like a little over 4 amps. Okay, question.
On relative compression, how can you tell which cylinder is causing the problem?
Oh, very good question. On relative compression, how can we tell what cylinder is causing the problem? Well, that is a pretty simple answer. What we need to do is make sure that you trigger on number 1 cylinder, okay? Or some cases, as Bill and I have come across for many, many times, number 1 cylinder is number 1 cylinder is not going to be accessible. So let's say the firing is 1, 3, 4, 2, and you could get to number 3. You put it on number 3, and then you would count the firing as 4, 2, 1, and you would see where those humps are down. So if I brought up any of the stuff that we had before, and Dorman, see if we could maybe pop that thing back on to the tool.
There it is.
Yeah, Murphy's Law.
But it's blinking.
They have,
It needs to blink like that.
all right, I'm going into Data Manager, and I'm going into, so look at all the screens that I saved here. Now I can blow them up. And in your handout, I'll stick some of these in there. So there's that screen I just saved. And if we go back to the relative compression one, all right, Bill, let's try it. And I'll try to stop it. Hang on, we got to get the time frame too. All right, let's see. Okay, good. So now we go back. I'll take this screenshot right here. Here's where the amperage first went up. You see voltage went down. There's ignition. So now I'm going to just save this shot for you. Now I'm going to move this a frame. Now we could see what cylinder is low right here. Based off our firing order, let's say if we're on number 1, we would have, let me move this back. So if this was 1, then we'd count this out 1, 3, 4, 2, but this is, I think, a 6 cylinder, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say that's cylinder number 6 right there. There's where our problem would be, okay? The nice thing, you could play with this as well and save the screen. You can see that voltage goes down, the amperage went up. Pretty nice setup. One thing you can't do when you're in here and it's already saved, you can't go back and play with the time. I could do this and blow it up, okay? So there it looks a little bit nicer. Yep, sorry about that. It looks a little more nicer, and you can see the pronounced hump, right? And I think, can I move it sideways? No. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, so there we go. And I'll just move that in a little bit, but move it sideways. Take another picture. Okay. And then you can tell where your problem is. So thank you, Bill, for doing that. And any other questions while we're there? So we're near the end. We got to go back to the slides for a second here. We have a couple of things coming up, and don't forget, we'll see you next Wednesday. We have, if you want to come in my hands-on Labscope class down in Comar, PA at the Dorman Center Proving Ground. We got 2 seats left. You bring your own scope. We hook up to test boards, and we hook up to a real vehicle. So it's hands-on training. from, what time is it there? From 8 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, Eastern time. They'll give you lunch and some donuts and stuff in the morning. If you want to come to our heavy duty brake class, Swede and I will be doing that on now only one day, Halloween. That would be October 31st, and we won't trick or treat you. You'll learn a whole bunch of stuff on heavy duty brakes. We'll have stuff for you to go there, how to adjust brakes, how to actually work on air chambers, how to cage your chamber, everything to do with heavy duty brake systems. Okay, both of them come with a full color handout. The one with Swede and I is from 8 to 4:30. There's breakfast and lunch in that. It doesn't say the price there, but you can check it out on the Dorman Training website, dormantrainingcenter.com. And if you have any other questions or comments, what would you like to see in the future? You know, one of my guys today, Scott, said, gee, how do you come up with all this stuff? You know, we've been doing this Lunch and Learns from about 2020 with Dorman, I think 21. So it's a lot of years of different stuff. And if you go to the website and see all the ones we have there, it's a library for you to utilize to help out in maybe you had a brain fart. You don't remember how something was done. Again, go to dormantrainingcenter.com. Sometimes they don't get up too fast there, but go to attstraining.com, put your email in, make a password, and that way you could always get back in. Go on the videos, Dorman Lunch and Learn, and you can see all of them. If there's no questions or comments, if you think the stuff I presented today was helpful, please give me a letter Y. If you think I suck, that's okay. Put the letter S. And if you could tell me why I suck, that's even better. That way next time I won't suck as much, okay? But I want to thank you for coming out. Thank you for spending your time with me. We'll see you next time, next week on a Dorman Lunch and Learn. Have a great day.